Good morning, everyone. Monday morning. I expect you're all getting ready for school and for work, but I thought I'd just come and have a look behind day 14 in case you haven't gone anywhere yet. Day 14. Shall we have a look? There is, a lion. Now, do you remember at the end of yesterday I said that all the people who were taken from their land that they lived in, and they ended up being slaves in a land called Babylon, and they settled down like God had promised them to, and they said they made houses, they lived there, they were fairly happy, but they always felt that they weren't in the right place, and God knew that. And God had his hand on a very special man called Daniel. He made Daniel very clever, the Bible tells us. And the king at the time, King Darius or King Darius, depending on how you want to describe him, he noticed that Daniel was very, very clever, and he took Daniel to work with him. And Daniel became very popular because God had his hand on him. He listened to God, and then he made all the right decisions for the king. But the other helpers, the other leaders within the palace, they didn't like him very much, and they tried to get him into trouble. They plotted together, they whispered bad things about Daniel, and then they came up with this really bad idea. They thought it was good. They noticed that Daniel prayed to God very regularly. We learned that 3 times a day Daniel would go into his room, shut the door, and he would just pray and talk with his Father God. And the bad men in the palace, they thought, here's a way to trick him. So they went to the king, they went to King Darius, and they said, we have a brilliant idea, O king. You are so wonderful. Why don't you make it a new law that nobody can pray to anybody except you, king? People can worship you, the king, and pray to you, and they don't need to speak to any other person in prayer. Well, when Daniel heard this new rule, he was a bit, what can I do? I can't not pray to God. But if I do pray and I'm found out, well, the punishment was really bad. The punishment was to be thrown into a big pit or a den full of lions who would probably like to eat people for their tea. What should he do? He knows the right thing is to keep praying to God and not to pray to the king, because the king is not God. But he knows if he does the right thing, he might die. But God knew, and God had his hand. And Daniel went and carried on praying just as normal. And of course, the bad men, the bad workers, they heard and they saw, and they ran back to the king. Oh, king, king, king! Just like they were tattletaling and telling on Daniel. And the king was so upset when he heard, because he realised he'd been tricked by those bad workers of him. He shouldn't have made that law. And he realised as soon as that happened that he had to carry on, and Daniel would have to be thrown into the lions. But the king said something really, really interesting just before he put Daniel in with the lions. He said, may your God keep you safe, or words to that effect. And Daniel went in with the lions, and the king went back home, and all night he didn't sleep. He probably paced up and down, biting his fingernails, wondering and worrying about Daniel. Would he be safe? What would happen? And in the morning, first light, he ran to the den to see if Daniel was still there. And Daniel was still alive. Daniel was fine because God was with him. God protected him. He kept the mouths of the lions completely shut. So no harm, not even a scratch, was on Daniel. And as they took Daniel from the den, the king was overwhelmed, and he said, surely your God is the God that we must all worship. And instead of that silly law that said that people should worship him, he made it a law, and he encouraged everyone in the land to worship Daniel's God, because Daniel's God is the true God, and Daniel's God is my God and your God too. And that's the God we should be worshipping. And do you remember when I was telling you yesterday that the prophets had that. They said that God had promised them that people will turn their heads to you when you are in that foreign land, and that I will be with you. And here, many, many years later, as Daniel was in a place in the palace, that is what was able to be happening. And Daniel was very similar to the man many days ago we learned about Joseph, because he worked for the king, he had authority, he could even tell people their dreams. And God had his hand on Daniel. Daniel was one of our other prophets, just like the ones from yesterday. And God kept sending people. And tomorrow, on day 15, I wonder who we'll find out about. I'll see you tomorrow morning when we open number 15. Have a great day. See you then. Bye.